Hello,
Hello, everybody.
is up. I'm with my name is Steven, tuning in for the first time, right over there. I think he's on my
What's
right. I'm
up?
pretty sure.
Yeah, on the screen I should be on your right. Yeah,
Should
yeah,
be,
that is
yeah.
correct.
All right, cool. Welcome to another episode of Pass the Salt. Um, Today we'll be talking about responding to racism. Good topic. Great topic.
Deep topic, that's for sure.
Yes, for sure. It's probably gonna be like a two-part series. I don't think we're gonna get all through it today. We'll probably discuss it more in the next podcast. Well, but yeah, let's get right into it. Um, so racism. How would you define it, Tom?
Racism?
Yeah.
Um, it could be any action, so verbal,
Hmm.
physical, or even mental, I guess, act
Hmm.
on which I'm trying to think. So yeah, so physical, mental, or verbal act that does not treat another race equally or puts down another race. Essentially, it is
Fair.
a good way I would put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I think it's like the belief that um like specific races are more inferior or superior to others. I think that's definitely part of racism. So then on the topic of racism, um how do you think like ignorance, prejudice, and all this kind of other similar, I guess, aspects, how would you define those? Are they the same thing? Are they different? Um,
Um.
yeah, let's start with like the I guess the most common, like ignorance, prejudice, I guess.
Yeah, that's like a loaded question.
It is for sure. Yeah.
So ignorance is what you're asking. So I mean, everyone knows the saying "ignorance is bliss," right?
Mhm.
I honestly didn't understand what that actually meant until until someone kind of like just explained it to me.
Yeah.
So I do understand what they're essentially saying. But like ignorance, there's a good kind of ignorance, and then there's a bad kind of ignorance. A
Okay.
good kind of ignorance is like childlike ignorance, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Where like you literally don't know because you haven't experienced it yet, right? That's childlike in ignorance. That's how I kind of consider childlike ignorance.
Hmm.
Um, at the same time, um, ignorance as an like as you're older and you experience things is very different. That kind of ignorance is more so on the end of like the information is there, but you chose to ignore it.
Okay.
Um, or like you it's like a kind of like a subset of that would be I'm losing the word like privilege, for example. Privilege is a good example of ignorance that you haven't been able to, that's like ignorance
Okay.
that's been passed down like through the years essentially. Yeah,
Okay.
so something like that maybe. It's not the best definition, but it's
Yeah.
something, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I
Yeah.
guess so then how do you think like our like specifically ignorance speaking, like how do you think our ignorance or lack of knowledge um how does our ignorance or lack of knowledge kind of shape the way we see race? Like, has it affected you personally? Like, or like, has your ignorance specifically shaped the way you see race?
I think ignorance, um, it has to be coupled with something for it to change what you see about race. So it's like,
Mm,
I strongly believe that racism is a learned trait,
yeah.
right? Rather than like it's definitely nurtured in rather
Mm,
than nature doing its thing. So as a result, what I think about it is like, oh, if it's nurtured in, ignorance is coupled like it's passed, like I said, it's passed down privilege or things like that, where it's like if you grew up in it, it's like, oh, you just don't know better, and that's unfortunate, and that's kind of like the bad kind of ignorance.
yeah.
But like, let me put like another example. I was listening to a podcast where um there's a girl from Korea
Mm,
who, in Korea, like you don't experience things like that. And like when you see, for example, curly hair or like an afro,
yeah.
right? That's something new to you, right? Koreans don't have afros regularly,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Um, and so as a result, if you don't have an afro, then you know, some people might think, "Oh, I want to touch the afro. I want to see what it feels like."
Yeah.
They don't understand that that's not exactly the nicest thing to do, right?
Yes.
No one wants you to touch their hair. Like a random person comes up to you and touches your natural hair. It's like you're not an object to them. You're not like
Yeah.
in that kind of sense. But the person who's thinking that, the Korean person who's girl who's thinking that, it's like she just didn't know.
Hmm.
She's never had that experience. There was no like intention of malice. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? There was no malice interactions, but someone else had to teach her, right? Due to her ignorance of not knowing
Hmm.
about like what the proper conduct is. So like in
Yeah.
that situation, is the Korean girl racist? No. Definitely not, because knowing her context, it's like, you know, you can kind of now understand where she's coming from, but then, once again, society's very quick to judge,
Yeah.
very quick to, say things. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's definitely happened. Yeah, as Sarah says in chat, like that they do in Africa. They touch your skin when they see you for the first time, right? And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, like culturally, there are a lot of things that that's like either appropriate or not appropriate, and a lot of the times, because of kind of the lack of knowledge that we have in these things, um, it can very easily seem like we're doing something racist, or like in that, from other point of view, it could seem like we're doing something racist, right? But then um we just not like lack the knowledge of kind of knowing that specific culture or
Mm.
specific trait, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's, yeah, that's a very big part of it. um yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
yeah, it's a tough situation to be in, and it's definitely a learning process for sure. um so then, do you like, for kind of the, I know, like, specifically for me personally, I don't know if you've experienced it, but specifically for me personally, do you find that um that kind of our parents' generation, I don't know for you, but I feel like for my parents' generation, or maybe I don't know if it's just a generation thing, but I feel like my parents are pretty, like, I don't know if they're like ignorant or just racist, but like do you think it's racist when your, like, for example, my parents specifically, right? Like, they, like, specific example is like they don't um like they don't really care that much, but they highly prefer that I would marry into someone like in my own culture, right?
Mhm.
And like East Asian, like I'm Chinese, so they would prefer or highly prefer that I would marry someone into my own culture. Um Partly because of like it's easier to communicate. Sure, I get it. But at the same time, they also kind of have this kind of negative sort of attitude towards um specific cultures or specific races of people based on kind of how either how the world sees it or how a stereotypical like kind of aspect seems. So for example, I don't know if I like going too far for podcasts, but for example, my parents think like my parents are always like, yeah, don't like my mom works as a nurse, right? And like there are a lot of at her workplace there's a lot of Filipinos, right? And um like at her workplace there's a lot of Filipinos that kind of they like talk a lot, or they, I don't know like if it's specifically for her, but her kind of view of like Filipino is that like they often talk a lot kind of behind your back, right? Or that's like kind of like a thing that they do. Or there's like specific things that she dislikes um about specific races because of either like she's seen it kind of happen or like she's experienced it herself. And she is like, oh, like I would prefer you not to see, or like prefer you not to date or marry into that culture or that specific um race because of those negative things that she sees, right?
I don't think you're alone in that, brother.
Yeah,
You're
for
definitely not
sure.
alone in that.
Yeah. So then
You're definitely not alone in that.
is that like racism, or is that just like
100% that's racism. Yo,
oh
I say this all the time. I say this all the time.
yeah.
As a Korean, man, Koreans are super racist. Like, you can't deny it. Koreans are mad racist. Like, the amount of because Korean history, the whole idea is that, for
Yeah.
example, right, Japanese people, invaded Korea. They occupied Korea for like decades,
Hmm.
and then treated Koreans like trash, etc., etc. And of course, there's quote unquote justified hatred against
Hmm.
Japanese in Korean history. Now, that being said, we're now decades after that fact, right? And then it comes to ask, like, how long it how long do you have to be like hold that grudge, or how long is it justified for, right?
Fair, yeah.
that
My mom's
that
always
like
like,
it's no
dude,
longer
my mom's
prejudice.
always like, yeah, like Japanese girls are cute, but like they also invaded us, and I was like, I don't think that
Yeah,
argument stands, mom. Like, I don't think that's how it
I'm
works, but
saying.
okay.
It's like,
Yeah.
how long do you have to wait
Like,
for you to
it's
not feel
like,
bad about it,
I don't know if that argument stands, but okay. Thanks, mom.
Yeah, like, there's one side, there's that, but at the same time, the other side of this is like,
Mhm.
um, if I'm gonna say this right now, if my mom saw me coming with a black girl, she'd be like, "What?"
Fair. Fair.
like, like
Yeah, that's
I mean,
true.
like, it's extremely rude when you think
Mhm.
about it, right? We laugh about it because it's so ridiculous, right?
Mhm.
And they have all this prejudice. Like, there's that clip of the Korean Ajumma who
Mhm.
got freaked out that it was a black guy beside her,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
difference between getting freaked out and then
Yeah.
seeing a black that person and then getting freaked out. And like that video went viral, right? And it's like some people are like, oh, it's just her being scared because who's gonna expect someone to be right beside you? I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, that reaction was a little overkill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
more signs, subtle signs where you can clearly see it was not just because the person was there. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
When you're scared that someone's beside you, you're like, oh, and you kind of stop. But hers
Yeah.
was like straight up fear, you know.
Yeah.
And so I say like Koreans extremely racist. My mom would say that
Mm.
like say to me like, oh, I don't want you to date Chinese girls. Like Chinese girls are bad, but Chinese guys are fine, and that's why Koreans are okay with their daughters dating Chinese guys, but not the sons dating Chinese girls. I was like, what's this? What is this standard? What like
Mm.
it just nonstop prejudice, nonstop like hearsay, and sure, maybe it's a cultural thing, and once again, they've experienced something. Maybe they have it, but it's all anecdotal, right? It's at the end of the day, one person or a group of people don't speak for the majority of that
Yeah.
culture, right?
Yeah.
It never should justify how you first interact with someone else,
Hmm. For
right?
sure.
And so the idea here is like if you ever meet someone, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
matter who they are, and what they've like until they have shown enough reason to not interact with the person, right? Then why should you treat them differently? They're human just like us, right? It shouldn't matter like what you think about their culture. It's like whatever. What if that person's different? You're not going to give them a chance because you thought otherwise. Like, it's extremely once again ignorant to think that way, right? Very ignorant to think that way.
Janie says your mom wants you to find a Chinese.
Oh yeah, totally. Totally.
Totally.
Let me just
Oh.
go get Allison's permission real quick. Just gotta double check that she's okay
Yeah.
with it too, you know?
Yeah. Just that
You okay
one.
with me dating a Chinese man now?
Perfect. Um. Okay. So then, I guess like talking about racism from,
Mhm.
I guess moving a little bit into more biblical aspects a little bit. Like, do
Mhm.
you think God favors any race above like others? Because like we hear a lot about like God's people, like Israelites, etc., other this whatever, right? Like,
Mhm.
do you think God favors any race above others?
No, I don't think it's attributed to race. I think it's more attributed to God favors those who believe in him. So in the Old Testament, it's more so like it's like they say Israelites because I mean that's who believed in God and
Yeah.
trusted in God.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
but there
Sure.
are cases like for
Mhm.
example in like Joshua where
Mhm.
um I forget I believe was it a prostitute? I don't remember.
Mhm.
But she would like as they were invading, God literally specifically said, like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you can save her." She was saved, and she wasn't
Mhm.
an Israelite, but she was married into you know the tribes and
Mhm.
etc. etc. But like that's an example of it's like no, it's clear proof that God doesn't favor just anyone. Like He favors everyone who believes in Him because everything is made in God's image, or
Mhm.
we are made in God's image, and God has created everything, as said in Genesis. So. Um, it would be kind of messed up if God's like, "Oh yeah, I created you, but like you're kind of you're kind of dookie." that's kind of messed up to think that way.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say no. God definitely doesn't favor a particular race, especially not in the New Testament. I think that's clearly written in the New Testament that He doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, this is just a question that I thought of now that we're talking about race and God.
Mhm.
It's a kind of
Yeah.
weird question. You can think about it. It's I don't know if it's on topic or not, but but like so you know how like you know how for like because for us because we have like we have like ignorance and like pride or whatever that we like I'm sure growing up, like how we've learned, we've definitely had like as I said, like before, like we definitely have specific races, or more so I guess our parents, but like us too, maybe even so, of like specific races are like when we're racist, we have specific races that we find like more um I guess like more positive than other races in a sense. And on the topic of that, it's like the question is like who how do we perceive God, and is it racist to perceive, like I don't know if we can answer this question, but it's like how do we
Mhm.
perceive God, and is it racist to perceive God um as like someone who is white, or like does God have a race? Like how do we perceive
Mm,
God, and does God have a race? And how does that affect us like in life, right?
right.
And how do you think that affects, like do you think it affects other people? Like I don't know if we're able to answer that, but like do you think it affects how people choose to believe in God, or how people choose to um yeah, like how Christians specifically, I guess, choose to believe or not believe and follow God? Like is the perception of who God is, like specifically in I guess race, like do you think that affects how people uh or like a people like a Christian lifestyle of like how people act, and right? Because like
Are you
let's
talking
say
about in the yeah?
like mm, let's say for example, it's like my perception of God is that um he is, I don't know, East Asian, and like like I'm like I believe in God because I think like he was an East Asian man, like, and like he was like culturally like I don't know, like culturally similar to me, and that's why I believe in God. Like that do you think there's a lot of cases where it's like that, like where people believe in God because uh like racially, like he's, or race, like they're perceiving God as a specific race?
Um, I mean, if anyone says Jesus Christ is not Middle Eastern, they're clearly wrong. The first and foremost, like
Okay.
if you know who Jesus was and where he was born, like to not call him Middle Eastern, like what are you saying? Like first off, it's God. God, God is never said to have a gender, or
Mm-hmm.
sorry, not gender, race, right? He is said to have a gender because we call him Heavenly Father, right? If you're a Christian to say God's a girl, that's kind of messed up
Hmm.
because clearly Jesus is male and has also said himself Heavenly Father. So it's safe to say that our God is male.
Hmm.
At the same time, right? Does do they specify, you know, what God looks like, what
Yeah.
race God is, not
Okay.
Jesus?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't. Um, but does
Because
to me it's like in the
yeah.
Christian faith, why does that matter though?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because the okay. So the reason I'm asking this question is, um, like I I thought about this question a little bit beforehand. I just remembered it, but the reason I'm asking this question is because I was reading an article. I don't think it's like a article by like Stanford or something. They did like a research or
Mhm.
whatever, where a lot of like how a lot of people perceive who God is affects how they think in terms of like race a lot. So
Mm.
the research found that people who perceive God as a white man, right? And even like kids who perceive God as a white man, or even adults, people who perceive God as a white man are more think like their kind of train of thought, or their like because of that perception, their kind of thought is that like in kind of life, or in a lot of society kind of positions, um like because God is white, white people should be in power in specific things, right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and same goes for like other races too. I think, I don't know, like I didn't look really into the research, but I feel like I think that was like what like was one of the points of like whatever they perceive God to be. They a lot of people who perceive God to be specific race kind of always think that like because God was that race, like leaders or higher position should like, or that specific race should be favored more over other races, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this just in general, or is it Christians or non-Christians, or does the study not say?
I don't think the studies. I think it's just like in general, like they did like a general number. Yeah.
I feel like in that situation, it's just like, once again, it's just people being power hungry, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Every, I think that's just human nature coming into play. Like it's like they're justifying their own personal ideals. Like, oh, that person should be in power
Oh
because of
wait, let
this reason. It's
me
like,
let me look up this article.
yeah. So
Okay.
like
Oh,
it
so
just doesn't make
it's
sense.
how U.S. Christians imagine God. So
U.S. Christian. Okay.
yeah, uh, so the research found that like a lot of people, I don't know, a lot of people who people constantly get exposed to the image of God as a white man, so that's how they found that when they did the first study, they found that 72% of people that they did, I don't know what like how many people they did, but 72% percepted, or that thought that in human form God was a white man, and then 6% were like other people. And then they did a thing. Where's faces? Uh, they found that way. They found that overall, the researchers found that um that most people said God was more male than female. Um, most people said that white Christians were more likely to say God was white, versus black Christians were more likely to say God was black. Um, and and then for their second study, they recruited they were asked to imagine that they worked for a company hiring a new supervisor, and then they were shown faces of 32 applicants and rate how each applicant would fit in the supervisory position. They found that Christians who conceptualized God as white and male rated white male job applicants more favorable than all other candidates. And then same with black. Okay. I guess that's kind of interesting.
Well, that's not. So that's more so that study. I feel like your question's misguided then,
Yeah.
because that study is not so much their perception of God.
Mhm.
It's the perception of their internal bias.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's fair.
so this is something that school boards are trying to address a lot. Like everyone has internal bias. So through racism, um, and things like that, like you generate internal bias, which is internal bias is where you have whether conscious or unconscious thoughts about someone, and it could be about anything. It could be about physique. It could be about their skin color. It could be like smart, what makes them smart or not, male, female, a lot of things. And internal bias, that's one category. Once again, skin color, where if you were to ask someone, are it would you deem them, you know, good for the role? Well, sad part is, uh, because of what you're fed when you're younger and all the way till where you're older, that does play a part into your internal bias. Most people have bias where, they would think certain things even though they deny that it doesn't. And so um it's those kind of ideas where internal bias is hard to address, but the
Yeah,
first part of addressing is to identify that you have it.
yeah.
So I don't think it's the idea that like those people are saying like, oh, because God's white, everyone else has to be white. I think it's just the idea that because they've seen so many white people with power,
Yeah,
right? Um, they have a prejudice, and just in society in general, right? White privilege, where um, just they always kind of favor the white man, essentially.
yeah,
And for black people, it's just the opposite. It's not like you know, uh just because they're black, um, and they've lived in a white society, that they're also going to have the same internal bias, like, oh yeah, black people are bad. Well, they're black. Obviously, they're not going to think black people are bad, right? So they're going to think the opposite, where it's like, oh, white people are rude towards us and yada yada yada. And so they would not be a good fit for this role, right? And that's internal bias. Once again, that's just internal bias. It's like when they see um, a black person, or sorry, a white person, um, that's their thoughts. That's the first thoughts that come to their head. What's interesting, though, that people have found, or researchers found now, is that trauma is genetic.
yeah,
There are deep-rooted trauma where trauma has affected someone like greatly, right? That trauma gets passed down through genetics. It like merges into your DNA. It's weird. And so some people will get triggered by something that doesn't make sense as to why they got triggered by it, because they've never personally experienced it in their life about anything that should trigger them, but it's from their parents. Their parents would get triggered in those situations, or their grandparents, or etc., etc., and it just gets passed down generation by generation. So that's kind of interesting, where it's like, okay, is that justified then? On the sense of like, oh, if it's if it's trauma and it's been that bad, it's like, how do you do that? But I think that's a whole other topic. But to kind of sum it all up, it doesn't matter who it is. Racism, a lot of people assume racism is towards, oh, Asians, it's towards black people, it's
yeah,
towards no, racism's from any race to any race.
yeah,
There's no rule, right? It's just the basic definition is that you are mistreating another person due to their skin color or due to their race, and that's it. That's the only definition. And I will say, almost everybody, is a little bit racist.
yeah.
I meme about the song from Avenue Q all the time, because the song literally goes, "Everyone's a little bit racist," right? And it's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah,
Um, but it's like, but it's true. Everyone is racist, like in one way or another, and it's not. You might not outwardly show it, but it's through your internal bias that you definitely have some sort of racism ingrained inside you because of how you've grown up and what you've seen and learned. But it's your job to do better, and to constantly work towards it, work towards being better.
yeah,
And that's what makes it hard.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, um, like, even in like jobs, especially. not job, even in just life in general, right? Um, like I know it's a lot better now, but I know that like a lot of jobs even currently has um like I don't know if it still happens. I'm sure it still happens, but like a lot of jobs like they prefer specific races over another, right? And I think that's something I guess moving on. I don't know if it's a clear question, but moving on to oh, how do we deal with like what are the ways that we deal with racism, and especially in everyday society where it's like, for example, like one of the biggest issues is like I know that a lot of people struggle with is um I don't know about now, but before it was like a lot about kind of like finding jobs, and that like you're more like a lot of companies or a lot of places are more likely to hire the own race versus foreigner, right?
Yep,
And
there
yeah,
was a study on like people who had foreign looking names were
yeah,
hired less.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's like things like small things like that. Well, not I guess that's not small, but like things like that. It's like how do we deal with that? And have you ever like personally have you ever experienced? Well, I'm sure you have like experienced something like that, and like how have you kind of dealt with it?
Personally, actually, I haven't experienced anything where I don't think I got a job because I was Asian or I had an
Okay.
Asian
Yeah.
name.
Okay.
Um, which is a good thing on my
Yeah.
side. Actually, it's actually worked in my favor recently to get my current job.
Okay.
Because of course, people are fighting for diversity, or more
Yeah.
so for diversity now. And so, as a result, like I just got to be able to kind of get into a situation where
Yeah.
being Asian or being a minority was a good thing for,
A
my
job.
workplace, for
Yeah.
example. So things are shifting. Certain places
Mm,
are putting more emphasis on that, but
mhm.
uh, I could definitely see like there were definitely issues before
Yeah.
on that.
So
So
I guess
yeah.
like I have another question. Like, do you think that it's I guess not racism, or but do you think that it's wrong for places to require you to speak a specific language um in order to be in that position? And
Um
I'm not talking about so like if you're in China and like they require you to speak Chinese, sure, whatever. Like I'm not talking about that, right? I'm talking about like specifically, let's say in Canada, where the national language or the most common used language is English, right?
yeah.
Do you think it's wrong for a place to be like, hey, you have to know how to speak, let's say Korean, like a Korean restaurant? It's like, hey, you have to know how to speak Korean, otherwise we're not gonna hire you. Because sure, like I get that they want to target and gear towards because it's Korean food and they want to target towards Korean, right? But like if they're like, hey, like we're not gonna hire anyone who doesn't speak Korean, is that wrong?
Uh Technically yes. But nepotism has always been a thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Um right? And so it's just a case of nepotism where
Hmm.
it's like we favor this candidate over another
Yeah,
because they're Korean. And it's like, sure, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like it's your establishment. You get to do what you want.
that's fair. Yeah.
But do I think that it's wrong? Absolutely. Um, because once again, if you're and a lot of stores like that are once again owned by you know, probably most likely
Right. Yeah.
first gen
Like of that
like whether of that race.
of
Yeah,
that, right?
exactly.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
so it's like it's to be expected that they would have that sense of pride and nepotism for that.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think it's justified in any way. It's like, well,
Yeah.
it's not like if they speak perfect English, sure, but it's like okay, what are you gonna do when a customer doesn't speak your language and is trying to order? It's not like everyone going into your store is gonna be Korean. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
So they're
that's
banking
true.
on people. They're banking on people that are Korean and also know English. And I'm just like, okay. Or you can just hire people who are Korean if you're looking for Korean speaking for Korean customers, and then you can hire anyone else who's competent in serving. For example, if you're going
Yeah.
to talk about a restaurant, to deal with the English customers. But it's like
Fair.
that language barrier is not something they want to go through. Like, do your parents speak fluent English?
No, my parents do not speak.
Have they ever thought of learning it?
My
Or
mom speaks like not bad, like she's because she also like speak like my mom speaks pretty decent English. I don't think it's like fluent, but it's good enough that like she can communicate because she communicates a lot like at work and stuff. My dad, on
yeah,
the other hand, is just like broken English. You will not understand a word he says. Like this man, yeah. And my parents just, I don't know. My dad just never really thought about learning it. He's just kind of like he learns the basics to get by, but I don't think he would like learn it to like
has he like made excuses to learn
um
it?
yeah, he's like I don't really need it. Like I get by fine with basics.
So that's what I'm saying. So that's like the situation. My mom does that too. I'm not saying
Yeah,
your
yeah,
dad's not the only one. My mom does that too.
yeah.
She only recently now she's like, oh, I should practice history. I should practice. But like, it's like
Yeah, yeah,
you could say that all you want and say that you need it, but you really, if you really cared, you do it. If but you don't clearly fully care,
yeah.
right? You clearly don't care enough to actually get started on it and actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, like it's in those situations where um it's like you chose not to learn English. So if you can't get frustrated when a customer talks to you in English when you live in Canada, like that's not how that works, right? It's like if you're owning a restaurant and it's a Korean restaurant, but someone that wants to try Korean food, but they don't speak any Korean and you can't communicate with them, and you're getting frustrated and they're getting frustrated,
Yeah,
the customer's not in the wrong. You are.
yeah.
You as an owner for not being able to communicate
Mm-hmm.
are in the wrong. You need to figure out how to communicate that, and that could also once again be solved by finding someone who speaks English, for example. Um, and it's in that kind of situation. So like people view it. Some people might view it in a very like small lens. They don't see the big picture and understand why it's good to hire around. But I mean, I can only say so much. I'm not going to change their minds or anything like that, right? There's always going to be pros and cons, and oftentimes they're like, we don't care. Just like you said, your dad's saying, it's like it doesn't matter. We'll get by anyways, and it's
Yeah,
true. They will get by.
yeah,
But so who am I to say, right? It's not like it's impossible, but I do not agree with just hiring one specific race
yeah,
just because of that. Yeah. So that's my thoughts into it for sure.
yeah, for sure. Um, I guess like with that said, like, what are some ways that you think we can form, I guess, a better connection or a better kind of communication with people who have different races? And like, do you think there are things that we can be doing to help bridge that gap of kind of bridge that gap?
Wait, sorry, could you repeat that?
So um like for us specifically too, right? Like I'm sure there are, I know for me like for sure there are definitely times where, yeah, like I'm racist towards specific races, right? And like even growing up, like for me personally, um, there are specific races that are, I wouldn't say I look down on, but that I don't kind of learn, or I don't kind of know as much about. And there, and because of my ignorance, I sometimes am racist towards those people, right? Um, and whether that kind of looks like, for example, like I'll admit, like majority of my friends, I would say, are like East Asian, right? And for me personally, like it's because kind of, I guess I've grown up in like an East Asian community, like I'm more comfortable with um like East Asians overall, right? And um like because of how, like for me specifically, because of how like my parents' generation are like have racial tendencies towards specific groups of people, I also pick up some of those kind of like negative tendencies too, right? When it comes to like making friends, or when it comes to kind of just like who I pick to hang out with, even. Like I'll admit, like for me personally, like I, like because of how I grew up, or like kind of how I, like even just even like through my ignorance and like my lack of knowledge, it's like I don't, like I, like if you, I don't know, if two random people came up to me and one was East Asian and one was, I don't know, like let's say like, I don't know, black, or I don't know, some other race, right? Like, and both of them go like, "Oh, like hang out with me," right? I would probably pick the East Asian because one, I'm more comfortable in that situation, right?
Mhm.
And um and like whatever, and I would probably build a friendship with whoever's East Asian rather than whoever's not, right? Like if I had to pick and choose, and that, like again, like I said, comes from the kind of just overall like how I was raised, and like how what I was taught of like, oh, like what kind of like the racial tendencies of like, oh, they have specific negative things that you have to watch out for, whereas like East Asians, it's like there's a lot less negative things that I, like I was taught to look out for, right, of my own race.
Yeah.
So then the question is like, what are some things that you think we can do to kind of not continue those racial tendencies, or bridge those gaps of like like racial.
So one thing I will say, if anyone has ever had the thought of, for example, you see someone of another race
Mhm,
and you ever thought to yourself, "Oh, I have to oh, I should make sure I don't look like I'm doing this or I'm thinking this."
mhm,
Congratulations, you have internal bias that is racist towards that race.
mhm.
However, it's a good thing, right? Even though
Yeah.
you have racist tendencies or thoughts, the fact that you have to consciously tell yourself is a fact that you have racist internal bias. Um, but you are able to identify that and try to make yourself look more natural, because you shouldn't treat them that way, is a good thing. I think that's
Mhm,
like a good positive out of it. So even though you're identifying that yes, I am racist inside, but I don't want to make that something normal in my every day-to-day life. I don't make sure that I
Mm,
present myself as loving to everyone else, I think that's a good thing.
for
And it takes
sure.
one step at a time like that. You have to admit that like you have those issues, right?
Mm,
So I think that's the first part is understanding, especially with internal bias. It's like understanding and admitting that you have internal bias. There's a lot of people that deny it all the time. They're like, "No, I don't have internal bias." Blah blah blah. Like I'm nice to everybody, well, and things like that. I'm like, but if you told me to analyze your body language and things like that, it's probably not the case for majority of things. And I don't know what your inner thoughts are, right?
yeah.
Like the way you find out is when you're pushed to the brink of something, right? When you're pushed to the edge and the small actions that you do during those situations really show what your actual true thoughts are.
Mm,
Like if you're left alone at night with someone, right? Any actions, like what actions do you take? Do you grip your stuff harder? Do you walk faster to avoid people? Like those are all things that actually show your true tendencies, right? Your true
mhm,
beliefs. And it's like, oh, it's because it's dangerous. It's like, why? And then, like, of course, certain things are justified. Like, of course, women, if they walk alone at night, it's not a good thing. It is unsafe, right? That
yeah.
in general is true. Um, but I'm not talking about that. It's like, it's just in situations where I know so many people who like grip their stuff tighter when they're alone with someone. Like,
Mhm.
and it's not at night, it's just in general.
Yeah, for
They grip
sure.
their stuff tighter because that's their their thoughts like, "Oh, he might take something when I'm
Yeah.
not looking." Right? He or she might take something. And it's those kind of things where it's like, yeah, everyone has those tendencies. It's just whether or not what you do with it afterwards, understanding what can you do from there. So like for myself, I have of course have internal bias, but how am I doing to combat it? I'm trying to tell myself every day, what can I do better than yesterday?
Mhm.
What did I do today? What can I do better tomorrow? And it's just one step at a time. Or what did I say today that was bad? And then um, how can I fix that for next time? How can I make sure I don't think like that next time? And it's just little steps like that. But you'd be surprised how many people don't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to take like that, and even like I find that even like like having conversations and even just being like making people aware that like sometimes even like I don't know for like specifically for my parents. I don't know how, for my friends, but like I know for my parents, it's like one of the biggest thing that like helps is like just friendly reminders, even, right? Of like,
Mhm.
oh, that's like like even friendly reminders of like, oh, that's kind of racist and shouldn't be kind of talking about people at or whatever. Even those like little things help remind my parents kind of the way that they either talk about people or like treat people or kind of go about how they like live life, right? Like a lot of the times like my mom comes back from work and she's always complaining about like someone at work, and I'm like mom, just like let it be, like it happens, but like that's also like racist on your part to be complaining specifically about like to be talking about something like negative about that person based on their race, right? Or like looking
Oh yeah.
out, yeah, on that race. And the more kind of that I bring it up and to just gently remind her that like it's not okay, the more she's kind of like changed for the better, right? And over the years, like it's
Yeah.
gotten a lot better. And I think, yeah, like you said, like start even for like yourself to start like small and just to kind of remind yourself of like, oh, like, um, is this something that's like racist or like is this because I have a specific view?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's something I tell my mom too all the time as well. Um, it's like what you said there is not okay. Like
Yeah.
sometimes just keep your mouth shut, but
Yeah.
you don't have to say that. You don't have to say it like that. Um, so it's things like that. I definitely agree. It's not a good thing to do that or think like that. So yeah, it's a good thing that you're doing. It's what I tell my parents too, and I have to constantly remind. Or my dad doesn't do it as much. My mom's the more outspoken one in that sense, in those situations. Um, but yeah, no, I think that's a really good thing, and that's a good step. Because like, how else are they going to learn, right? No one else is going to tell them otherwise. It has to be us, and we're the
Yeah.
ones that tell them like, hey, this is how society is here. You need to understand, like, you can't do that here. That's not how society
Yeah,
works here.
definitely.
So that's the big thing. Um, yeah, like I think that's the best way to approach with your parents, and I think we all understand now as we grew older, like um our parents are just they're just trying their best at the end of the day, you know? They're just trying their best at the end of the day, and what can you do? What more can you do other than try to make continue help them to do a little bit better than than last time, you know?
Dude, I remember when the whole like Black Lives Matter thing was going on. Mom was like, my mom was, all lives matter. Okay, I'm like, mom, just I don't know, like let me talk to you about it. It's not about all lives matter, mom. This is
Mhm.
not what.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's like, I agree with all lives matter. Why are they so angry? I'm like, mom, just educate. Let's educate ourselves all together.
Yep,
uh,
exactly.
small thing, small
Let's talk
steps.
about this
Let's
here real
let's
quick.
educate all of ourselves. I'll educate myself too. Well, I'll talk about small steps. Yeah. Anyways, I think we're gonna end off there. It's pretty good chat. We'll probably uh have another session. There are some other questions about racism that we can definitely talk about next time. Um, for next month's podcast that we can save. We can do a part two to talk about that. But
Sounds good with me.
yeah. Do you have any final remarks about racism, or just how to
Final
respond?
remarks? No, I think I feel like we
Yeah, I
hit
think we've hit
majority of
a lot
it.
of good points
Yeah,
about
well, bit of
racism.
overall more. Yeah, it's a touchy subject, but like at the
Yeah.
end of the day, it's like at the end of the day, you just gotta admit that you have it, and it's just what matters is what you do
Mhm.
from that, right? It. I guess the last thing I'll say is like, for example, BLM movement. It's not just about you joining in because it's loud. It's about you joining in because you actually care, right? You have to actually do it because you care about it, not because, oh, everyone's doing it and I look like an ass if I don't do it. It's like, no, do it because you care. Don't do it because someone else told you to do it. That's not how it works.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, a lot of people
So,
like do it because they're like, oh, like
yeah, that's what people need to work on. It's like you need to understand that's not why you do Black Lives Matter and things like that. Like you got to do it from from the goodness of your heart, and that's why you do it, you know? So, I don't know. I guess that's how I'll end it. Hopefully that resonates with people.
yeah. Okay. Um, close this off. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for this time where we're able to, yeah, come together to talk about uh, such a big and kind of heavy subject, Father. And thank you for all the good conversations that we put out and that we were able to share. And Father, as we continue to learn more about who you are and learn more about how to deal with all these society issues, and especially when it comes to racism and the topic of race and how to deal with all subject, uh, yeah, help us really open our eyes to all that goes around us, that all the things that contribute towards racial injustice, and all the things that that contributes towards all these negative things really help us understand and give us the knowledge personally and as even as a society to help us grow and to help us recognize racism when we see it, and to help us really just respond well to it and respond in a loving and caring way, um, and give us grace to be able to reflect on our own actions as well, and our own kind of our own ideas and thoughts we have, and actions that maybe in the past or even in the future that contributes to this negative impact and this negative uh, thing, and help us grant us the strength and um, knowledge to be able to take action to really put an end to racial injustice in the world, all forms, to be able to just, yeah, like slowly respond and slowly um, help us grow in ways that you want. And Father God, as we continue to talk and chat on future podcasts and future events, as Lightly Salted, help us grow as a community, believers and non believers, to come together to really uh, grow together as a community, really just enjoy a safe space where we can hang out to learn about more about who you are. And I pray for the rest of we head into May. Uh, pray as kind of everything's opening up from virus. Pray that we go back to a more normal, I would say, life. That you would just continue protecting us and continue guiding us in every step of the way, that we may do all things. Pray all of these things
Amen. Hey,
from us. Where to catch me at Kid on me.
yep, teacher tell.
Oh, both on. Yeah, I haven't been on Twitch. Don't come on my Twitch. I haven't been on Twitch for like months.
Same. I haven't been on Twitch
I
for
haven't
a
been
while,
on
but you
Twitch
can
for
be back.
like months. You can still go on.
You,
I might start streaming more. We'll see. I don't know. I just quit my job, guys. For those of you who don't know,
oh, nice.
uh, my last day is actually the Saturday, so I'll be a little more free. But uh, yeah, we'll be hanging out. Feel free to join our Discord as well. Our ministry Discord, I put it in the chat. We hang out, we play games a lot. We stream every Wednesdays, I believe, or Wednesdays. Um, and summer's coming up, so we have some events and tournaments coming up. But other than that, thanks again for coming out. Thank you, Tommy, for joining me.
No problem.
And then I believe we'll have the next couple of months. I believe we'll have one more podcast next month in May, and then June is our interview. If I'm not wrong, I could be wrong, but I think that's schedule will be. So one more podcast in May, and then June is our interview, and summer month. I think we're still doing yes, but I'll have to stick it out. All of our information and updates can be found on our Discord, as well as website and Twitch channel. Follow us for more. Other than that, have a wonderful night.
Peace out.